Have you ever found yourself pushing for more of something good? More growth, more experience, more planning, only to watch things somehow get worse? Well, today we are going to unpack a really powerful principle that explains that exact paradox. It's one of those mental models that, once you see it, you will start seeing it absolutely everywhere. So let's dive right into the too much of a good thing effect. Here's the plan. First, we'll tackle a huge assumption we all make without even realizing it. Then, we'll dive into some wild stories about companies that flew a little too close to the sun. After that, we're going to uncover the hidden principle that explains what went wrong, see just how much evidence there is for it, and then, most importantly, finish up with a practical guide so you can avoid making the same mistakes. All right, part 1, the more is better myth. This is all about an idea that's so deep in our culture and our thinking that we barely even notice it's there. This is the default setting for how we think, right? From profits to productivity, from empowering your team to planning a project, the logic seems so simple. If a little bit of this is good, then a lot of it must be fantastic. So we try to maximize everything, thinking the path to success is just a straight line, always heading up. This is the question that changes everything. Because what if that straight line we all picture isn't really a line at all? So, let's see what this looks like in the real world. I've got 3 fascinating and kind of cautionary tales for you where that relentless push for more led straight to disaster. First up, empowerment. Way back in the early 20th century, there was this company, Columbia Conserve, and it was a huge success. The owner was a forward-thinking guy who believed in giving his workers more and more power. And for a while, it works like a charm. But he just kept pushing, aiming for a totally democratized workplace. And the result? It's pretty shocking. The workers actually went on strike against the very system that was supposed to empower them. Too much responsibility, too much democracy, and the whole thing just blew up. Okay, next, let's talk about diversification. In the late 90s, Nortel Networks was an absolute giant in the tech world. Their whole strategy was built on speed, specifically buying up other companies constantly, aggressively, to expand what they could offer. They even used to brag about rebranding an acquired company's coffee mugs within 24 hours. But that very strategy, that aggressive buying spree, is what ultimately sank the company. It stretched them too thin and left them completely exposed. And finally, let's talk about growth itself. People Express was the absolute darling of the airline industry back in the 80s. Their model was simple: cheap flights and lightning-fast growth. In just 6 years, they went from having 3 planes to being the 5th largest airline in the US. I mean, it was incredible. But their success was their downfall. In the end, it was as simple as this. They had grown too big, too fast. They couldn't pay their bills. And just like that, they were gone. So what in the world happened here? Empowerment, diversification, growth? These are all good things, right? This brings us to part 3, and this is where we solve the puzzle. It's time to introduce the core idea of this whole explainer, the tipping point principle. Researchers have a name for this, and it's a bit of a mouthful: the too much of a good thing effect. Now, the idea itself is ancient. I mean, you can go back to Aristotle talking about the doctrine of the mean, but it's a super powerful tool in modern science. It's the simple principle that for almost anything good, there's a tipping point where it stops helping you and actually starts to hurt you. So I want you to completely forget that straight line we imagined earlier. The real relationship looks like an upside-down U. In the beginning, as you add more of the good thing, your results go up. That's the left side of the curve. Everything's great. Then you reach the very top, the peak, that optimal point. But if you keep pushing past that peak, your results start to go down. You're now on the right side of the curve, where more is actually worse. Now, the peak of that curve, that is the most important part. It's called the inflection point. It is the sweet spot. See, the goal isn't maximization, just pushing for as much as you can possibly get. It's optimization, finding that perfect peak. If you go past it, at best you're just wasting your time and resources. At worst, you are actively doing damage. Now, you might be sitting there thinking, okay, those stories are interesting, but is this a real thing, like a widespread phenomenon? Well, let's get into part 4, because this isn't just a handful of anecdotes. It's backed up by a mountain of evidence across the board. Let's start with a personality trait: conscientiousness. We all want dependable, organized, responsible people on our teams, right? But what happens when you have too much of it? Well, extreme conscientiousness can lead to rigidity, an inability to adapt, a kind of perfectionism that just grinds everything to a halt. It can actually hurt performance. And this isn't just a gut feeling. A 2011 study in the Journal of Applied Psychology found exactly what the TMGT effect predicts, that telltale inverted U-shaped relationship. A healthy amount of conscientiousness is great, but extremely high levels are actually linked with lower job performance.
Okay, what about hiring? We just assume that the candidate with the most experience is always the best choice. But the research shows that after a certain point, the benefits really start to fade. Think about it. For simple, routine jobs, a super experienced person might just get bored, disengage, and actually perform worse than someone with just enough experience to do the job well.
The evidence for this is incredibly strong. A major meta-analysis, which is like a study of studies, so it's a big deal, concluded that the link between experience and performance is not a straight line at all. It's curvilinear. That means each extra year of experience doesn't give you the same boost in performance. Let's move on to entrepreneurship. Every business school, every book tells you to write a detailed plan, and it's true, planning is definitely linked to success. But what happens if you overplan? Well, entrepreneurs who spend way too much time planning can become rigid. They fall in love with their beautiful plan and then fail to adapt when reality inevitably punches them in the face.
So where's that inflection point? Research from 2005 actually found that the benefit of planning starts to drop off significantly after about 140 hours of prep work. Go beyond that, and the returns get smaller and smaller, and you run the risk of becoming too inflexible to actually succeed.
Our final example comes from the world of strategy. It's this idea of organizational slack, which is really just a formal way of talking about having extra resources. Spare cash, extra time, or people on the bench. A little bit of slack is great. It lets you jump on a sudden opportunity or survive a crisis. But too much slack is just waste. It's pure inefficiency, and worse, it can let managers fund their own pet projects that end up destroying value. This quote from a foundational paper on the topic just captures it perfectly. The researcher hypothesized the relationship is exactly what we've been talking about, positive up to a point, and then it turns negative. And you know what? Decades of research have proven him right over and over again. Okay, so we've laid out the principle, we've looked at the evidence, which brings us to our final and maybe most important section. How do we actually use this stuff? How do we take this from a cool theory and put it into action? Let's just quickly go back to those opening stories, but now let's look at them through this new lens. For Columbia Conserve, the good thing was worker empowerment, but a fully democratized workplace was too much. For Nortel, diversification was good, but an aggressive acquisition strategy was way too much. And for People Express, of course, growth was essential, but growing too big too fast was fatal. You see? They all blew right past their inflection points. So, how do you avoid this trap? It's really a simple 3-step process. First, just name it. Identify the good thing you're chasing. Then, and this is the crucial mental shift, you have to challenge the idea that more is always better. Ask the tough question. At what point could this go wrong? Look for the warning signs. And finally, you have to actively search for that inflection point. Hunt for the signs of diminishing returns. Because remember, the goal isn't to maximize, it's to optimize. This principle, it applies everywhere. To our work, to our health, to our relationships. We are just wired to believe more is better. But the wisest decision isn't always to push harder. Sometimes it's having the wisdom to know when to stop. So the question I want to leave you with is this. Where in your life or in your work do you need to stop pushing for more?